In the previous video, I experimented with one of my favorite building materials, Formply, and made this bookcase for the young apprentice. The young apprentice liked the look and feel of the bookshelf so much that she asked me to build her a new desk in the same style. So in today's video, we're going to continue the Formply theme and build a new desk using the same materials as before for the young apprentice. The core of the desk is going to be constructed out of 4 quarter panels of Formply. The first step is to cut the 3 side panels. I'm going to be using my table saw, but you can just as easily use a circular saw with a straight edge guide, a track saw, a hand saw, a seesaw, or really any other suitable straight cutting tool. After the side panels, we'll cut the cabinet top and bottom, as well as the 3 stretcher pieces that join the 2 halves of the desk together. For the main joinery, we're going to go with simple pocket holes. Pocket holes often get a bad rap, but they are the ideal fastener for creating cabinets quickly and easily. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about some basic cabinetry making, then check out my video on the topic. The young apprentice was helping out again, getting her hands dirty, drilling out her very first pocket holes. With our pocket holes now cut, we can assemble the drawer cabinet. When using pocket holes, be sure to clamp your workpieces securely to each other. This will ensure your workpieces don't move, especially since pocket holes have a tendency to want to do that. There are many useful videos on pocket hole tricks and techniques, and a great guide was recently posted by Shane over at DIY for Knuckleheads. It's well worth checking out, and I'll link to it in the description. One of the key secrets to getting good pocket hole results is to take it slow. Short bursts with your driver is all that's really needed to get a good result when it comes to pocket holes. So it really is a case of slow and steady does win in the end. With one side now done, we can flip it over and attach the other side in the same way. And just like that, we have the start of our cabinet drawer for our desk. To stiffen our cabinet and to eliminate any possible racking, we'll add these stretcher pieces to the back of the cabinet drawer. These will again be installed using simple pocket screws. I forgot to add a pocket hole to the stretchers that will allow me to screw into the top and bottom, so I'm just going to add that now directly into the top and bottom piece. You won't see any of the pocket holes on the finished product, as they'll either be hidden underneath the desk or underneath the desktop. So we've finished our first basic cabinetry part. Just basic pocket holes, nothing fancy. We'll move on to the next part of the desk. And if I have a look at here, so this is the back of the desk. So what we'll need to do now is to cut the supporting panels. I've already cut this leg panel. That was done at the very start. Now I'm going to cut this supporting panel and this supporting panel. And then inside will be some more supporting stretches, which will go. So that'll start to construct the carcass of the desk. So again, nothing simple. We're just going to use pocket holes to come in from here and the sides here. And all of this won't be seen. So obviously this is the back of the desk. We've put the pocket holes so that they're on the bottom and on the top of this panel here. And obviously the top panel or the desk top will cover those. So you won't see a single pocket screw in this type of construction. So again, very simple and I think very approachable for even the beginner DIYer. With the pieces all cut, it's back to the pocket hole jig. So here's a quick tip lesson here. It's always good to label your parts as you cut them. And the reason why I say that is you saw me at the very start of the video cut 3 of this. 1, 2, and 3 for the final leg. And because I didn't bother to label one of those legs, I've accidentally used it to cut up all of this. So now I'm short, and it's not like I'm short of some Formply. Look at it all. Here, 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 there on the floor, in the corner behind that. I mean, I've got plenty of Formply I could have cut all of this from, but no, I've accidentally chosen the 3rd leg of this in order to be able to do it. So I'm going to now have to cut some more Formply up to get to this 3rd leg. And yeah, a lesson to, put a bit of tape on there, label your panels so that you don't just do what I've done and have to spend some time cutting yet another one. So with the new side piece cut, we can now move on to assembling the right hand side of the desk and connecting it with our cabinet. Next, I'm going to add the stretchers that will join the 2 halves of the desk together. This project really is perfect for the budding DIY or woodworker. There are no complicated joinery techniques used here, and you only really need a basic set of tools to tackle this project. As Dainsy over at Dana Made would say, you just have to start. So if you're interested in tackling a project like this, I'll have links to dimensions and some plans in the description below. Next, I'm going to tackle the edge banding. Just like the shelf build, I'm going to use the same technique of using strips of our hardwood timber to cover the Formply edges. You could really use anything you like here. It could certainly be iron-on edge banding instead, or any other plywood edging that floats your boat. With the edging now complete, we can move on to the drawers, and the method I'm going to use in the construction of these is identical to the previous drawers I did for the bookshelf build. If you'd like to see that process in a bit more detail, then check out the link above, but for now we can enjoy a drawer building montage. Sometimes even when you measure really carefully, something happens and you're just trying to work out, how did that happen? So here's the top drawer. Nice smooth action. Too bloody long. Sit in the back of the desk here. I have no idea how this has happened. But we can fix this pretty easily. So what we'll need to do is take this drawer apart, trim these back down to the correct lengths, then reattach it all, recut this bottom panel. No big drama, but really don't know how I did that. Oh well.
A few moments later.
With that problem now solved, it's on to creating the drawer faces for the desk. I want to keep with the same aesthetics and use the same timber as the rest of the room, so I'm going to be using up the very last of the offcuts that I have that are big enough for the job. There isn't, however, enough here to just use them as is, so I'm going to have to resaw them over on the bandsaw to gain more panels. As soft as this wood looks from its colour, it's actually a hardwood and incredibly dense, so resawing this actually took quite a while. A quick few passes under the planer to get rid of the bandsaw marks and to bring them into final thickness. For the main drawer, I'm not going to use a drawer pull. Instead, what I'm going to do is round over the bottom of the drawer face itself and use that as the pull. And to achieve that, I'm going to do that on the router table. Installing drawer faces is really easy, and I've demonstrated this many times in previous videos. Playing cards make great spaces for drawer front installations, so it's handy to keep a pack in the workshop all the time. So I've made these face frames, or face drawer fronts, and I've gone to fit this bottom one, which is the largest one, and we are a fraction too short. I don't know what I was doing when I was measuring from here to here. I thought I had allowed for at least an extra centimetre of clearance here so that I could trim it back to size, but it looks like I've messed that up. So there are a couple of ways I can fix this. The first would be to simply raise this up to accommodate for that extra shortage, but obviously what's going to happen is we're going to have this horrible reveal at the bottom, so we don't want to do that. The second option obviously is to remake one of these. We don't have enough timber to do that, so we're not going to do that. The third option would be to lower the drawer slides so that we could have a little bit more clearance at the top, so we could drop this by 2 or 3 millimeters and it would still clear the bottom, no problem. But that would involve redoing the drawer slide positioning down and readjusting it, so I don't really want to do that either. So the easiest thing actually to do is to simply trim 2mm all the way around. So we can easily do that on the table saw. So I think that's the easiest thing to do. So what we'll do is we'll trim 2mm off the top of here. This will mean that this will no longer be sitting on the bottom, maybe 3mm just to be safe. And yes, it will reduce the depth of the shelf ever so slightly, but nothing significant enough that anyone's going to even notice once we put all the drawer fronts on. So that is what I'm going to do to fix that error. With the drawer fronts now complete, I want to turn my attention to the other side of the desk. In my design, I've added these floating or adjustable shelves that curve around the front of the desk. This was part design aesthetic and part practical decision. Because the desk is going to be sitting next to the entrance to a door, I didn't want that corner to protrude out and become a bit of a poking hazard. And of course, this gives me an opportunity to try something that I've never done before, which is to create some edge banding that's going to bend around that form. So our first job is to cut our shelves to size over on the table saw using some off-cut Formply. I can then cut close to the line using a jigsaw. I also keep the offcut that's created here, and you'll see why shortly. Then finally, to clean up the edge, I ran each shelf through the disc sander. I have these leftover strips from the bunk bed build where I trimmed off the edges, and I kept them because I thought that they might make some useful edge trimming later on, and I'm glad I did because obviously the time has now come. So I've got my rounded profile, nicely rounded. I'm thinking the idea is that we'll bend around this profile. Now, even though this is quite thin, I think we're only 3mm, so it's kind of thick actually. So I don't think, at least not without maybe some steam, maybe water to get that around. I think the easiest thing to do is maybe see if we can get this down a little bit further. So if I put this through the thicknesser, maybe see if I can get this down to maybe 2mm, and I think that that would bend pretty easily. So let's go ahead and try that on the thicknesser. The thicknesser on its own isn't going to be capable of milling this kind of thickness, so I'm going to need to get creative and use a sled to support the strips. Ideally, this is the kind of job that a drum sander would be ideal for, but alas, we don't have one, and as long as we take things slow here, then the thicknesser should also be a suitable alternative. So what I'm doing here is using another offcut of Formply and some double-sided tape to hold down the strips to it. With this extra support, we should be able to send this as a hole through the thicknesser. I've never tried this technique before. This will be a first for me, so hopefully if we take this slow, do some very shallow passes, we should be able to get some very thin stock here. After quite a few light passes through the thicknesser, we now have ourselves some custom-made edge banding that hopefully is thin enough to allow me to curve it around the floating shelves. This is where that little offcut that I kept before comes in handy. It allows us to apply a clamp to help us apply even pressure across the curve. While the edging is drying, we'll make a start on the top of the desk. The panel here is the last of the stock I have, and I've been saving this bit for the top of the desk. With the corner profile on the desk now done and the shelves still drying, I'll return to the drawer fronts and start thinking about adding some hardware. My usual technique for attaching drawer fronts is to make my own template, and that's something I showed in the last video. However, recently while browsing my local Bunnings, I saw the Craig hardware jig on clearance. Some box damaged open stock resulted in me scoring this handy jig for the low price of $10. Now, jigs like this aren't absolutely necessary to be able to effectively mount your cabinet hardware, but there is no question that they do make life easier, especially if you're going to do a lot of this. And the reality is that for $10 I really couldn't turn that deal down. By this stage, the shelf edging was dry and ready for trimming, and I'm going to do that over on the router table using a flush trim bit. After all of the shelf edges were trimmed, I then cut the shelves to their final width over on the table saw. The very bottom shelf is going to be fixed in place, and I'll once again use pocket holes to achieve this. So if you're following along and you've just watched me install the shelf pins here, you might be wondering, does this actually support the shelf with just 3? And it's a question that I didn't realize to ask myself until this exact point. I think it could, but I'm skeptical now looking at the width of the shelf, because obviously it depends on the width rather than it depending on the length. So if I let go, yep, we are too wide. I think there is a couple of solutions that we can do here. The first one is obviously just saying, you know what, do away with the shelf pins. Let's just screw this directly into the desk. Now, I don't want to do that because obviously we'd spent a bit of time designing it so that we could have the adjustable shelving. The other option obviously is just to maybe pin it from the back. It's just a single screw coming in from the back, but then again defies the point of having adjustable shelf pins. The third option, which I think is what I'm going to go for, is simply adding an additional pin to the back. So if I come around the side, so if we've got our shelf here, all we really need is a pin here to stop the shelf from moving. So if we put another shelf pin here, then that should be fine and that should support the shelf no problem. So if I use my shelf pin guide, and I think all I need to do theoretically is to raise this up by the width of the shelf, and then that should give me another set of shelf pins for the corner. So let's try that now and see if that solves the problem. Right, so I think that solved our problem. So it's just an extra shelf pin, so obviously without it doesn't support it. We'll put the extra pin in there. Nice and strong. Okay. So I think what I'll do is I'll continue that down that, and that should nearly be it for the shelves here. With that problem solved, we are on the home stretch, and the second last thing to do is to mount the top of the desk to the frame. To keep it simple, I'm going to screw directly into the top of the desk through the stretches of the desk frame. The holes I drill into the stretches will be oversized, and this will allow for the tabletop to contract and move with seasonal changes in weather. think we're almost basically there. We've given our desk a good wax. We've solved our pin problem. So definitely something I've learnt for next time is if I'm going to do something like this, think about the pin placement. But I don't mind the solution I've come up with. Yeah, there's an extra pin. That's alright. It's way back in the corner there and you can't really see it, and in terms of stability, I think it solves the problem. So I think what we'll do is I'll let that wax dry, maybe give it a buff later, and the next thing will be to move it into the house.